banks making it tough to borrow, buying a home in the UK is becoming an impossible dream.
You just can't get a mortgage, and around here the house prices are so high.
So a few brave, ordinary people are trailblazing what could be the solution for many of us.
Come on, baby.
Trying to build their own home from scratch. Maverick architect Piers Taylor and me, Kieran Long, are following 6 self-builders as they take on the biggest gamble of their lives.
I haven't got any option. You gotta do it.
We'll try to help them create the dream house they've longed for.
Wow.
They need to be clever with their cash and creative with design.
Kind of has clarity, looks very useful, doesn't it?
It does.
Cut windows. If it was me, I think I'd put my bath right here.
Kinky. But each has their life savings at stake.
Oh, what have they done?
Little or no building experience.
I haven't got absolutely no clue with design.
And a budget of less than £100,000 to spend.
How much money have you got left?
It won't be easy.
If I think too much about everything, I think, whoa.
This week, we're in the Shropshire countryside, where farmers Ruth and Tony are forced to tear down their decrepit farmhouse to make way for an ambitious contemporary home.
I'm not going to live in a barn, I want to live in a house in a home.
But will their determinedly modern design lead to a horrific blot on the beautiful landscape?
But to sit forever on the hilltop looking like a plastic shed, I need to make sure that isn't going to happen.
As money drains away,
It's going to be jolly tight, we're going to go over budget.
and the going gets tough,
I quite like this one. And I think that's awful. Looks like the garden shed.
will they wish they'd never started?
There's no way that I'm going to be building any more houses.
I'm on my way to Shropshire, where the old farm buildings are about to face a thoroughly modern arrival. Ruth and Tony Lawrence are facing a kind of timeless architectural task, that is, how to put a new building in a very beautiful landscape. They also face the task of putting a new building within a complex of older farm buildings, and that to me is the really important part of their build. This couple are on the brink of retirement, but with their crumbling old farmhouse beyond repair, they're having to knock it down and build a new one in its place. It's the biggest challenge of their life.
I would describe myself as a country girl, yes, definitely.
Ruth was born here, and then she and husband Tony took over the farm 20 years ago.
There are lots of memories associated with the house. It was a fantastic home, and I loved it dearly.
It's a big day. Once the old house is demolished, there'll be no turning back. They've saved hard for years, and that money is now on the line. It's their last chance to fulfill a lifelong dream, to build their perfect house for retirement, and leave a legacy for future generations of their farming family.
It'll be a little bit sadness, I suppose. We've lived here for 20 years, brought up our children, but it's like an old car, you know. When it's finished, it's finished.
But ditching the decrepit is one thing. Ruth and Tony's real challenge is creating a replacement that fits with the working farm and the glorious Shropshire landscape. These are questions that architects have grappled with for centuries, but now we're going to try and help Ruth and Tony face them in their own way. The old house was knocked down 3 months ago. The site is now clear and ready for building.
Hello, Kieran.
Hi, Kieran.
You could have brought better weather.
Hi, Ruth.
Hi, Kieran.
Nice to see you.
Nice to meet you.
Hi, Tony.
Nice to meet you.
Ruth and Tony have allowed just £99,000 to complete the entire build, so they will need to do all the construction work themselves. a tall order for a couple who have never built a house before.
This is the outside wall to approximately there.
And where am I stood now then?
You'll be in the utility room,
Utility
which
room.
will
And
go...
the stairs down to the basement.
I always wanted to be a painter.
They've had plans in place for months, and although they are completely inexperienced, they seem surprisingly confident.
Now the exciting bit starting, because I can drive the digger and start the new house.
Until the new house is built, they have no choice but to live in a tiny caravan on site, which is where they show me the designs they've had produced to their specification. My first thought? It's astonishingly ambitious for their sub 100k budget, and very much at odds with anything in the area. Their plan is to build a basement from brick and breeze block, with a 2-story timber frame on top. The rear faces the landscape, with a veranda and a built-on sunshade called a brise soleil. They're also planning to create a living roof covered with sedum plants and to cover the building with a pressure-treated cladding that will resist the weather. Not only have they bucked the trend by knocking down a house, they're planning to replace it with an enormous 200 square metre build and 100 square metre basement, 2.5 times the size of the average British home. £100,000 is a tiny amount for what looks like a large modern office space. Tell me what the motivation is behind making this building. Why are you doing it?
It kind of evolved, actually. We got some money when my dad passed away, and we thought, finally, we can renovate the old house. And then we started looking, and we thought, that's a lot of renovating needed here. And even if we renovate it to the best of our ability and use huge sums of money, we're still going to end up with an old farmhouse that might fall down.
Can I ask you a question, Kieran?
By all means.
What do you think of our design?
So I'm slightly surprised that a couple so aware of, farming and the landscape out here and the kind of tradition of building out here will build something so different from what traditional buildings are in this area.
I love the look of it. I think it's because we've been farming all our lives. I don't want to be in a building that could, for any incident, be mistaken that it was an old farm building.
Right.
Farmhouse, fine. Old farm building, no.
Ruth may be desperate for a modern house, but I'm really worried about their grasp of the figures. It doesn't sound remotely affordable. And it could be a monstrous eyesore in this pristine valley, especially the planned exterior.
It's a big decision exactly what to put on the outside of your house, because it makes a big impact, and I'm desperate to get it right.
There's so much at stake and only one chance to get it right. The man who will be alongside me for the duration of this build is Piers Taylor, founder of an award-winning radical architecture practice that aims to take forward-thinking design to low-budget builds. His experienced eye is soon spotting a whole lot of problems.
I mean, everything here looks expensive. It's got all these kind of fussy eaves, it's got changes of materials, steps in and out, handrails. I'm nervous looking at this, that this doesn't at the moment seem easily achievable for £100,000.
And I know that money is really tight with them too. My fear is that by the time they get to the interior, they're going to have very little.
But where is the stuff of the farm? It's on the site of a farm. It doesn't look like a farm at the moment. Where is the kind of character and patina of that landscape, that place? This looks slightly, well, it looks a little bit to me like a kind of business parky building. It doesn't have anything that's actually true to that place.
There are a multitude of issues here, including the location of the front door, which to Piers' mind should lead straight into the heart of the house, the kitchen.
The point of arrival into the building feels a little bit kind of convoluted. It's sort of slightly odd having a formal vestibule. You should be able to come in and out of the kitchen.
The kitchen really is the social hub, but like you say,
Yes.
You can't really walk directly into it. But an even bigger concern is the materials Ruth and Tony intend to use on the exterior.
Material is such an important thing in a kind of agricultural context. So what is this material? What's it clad in?
Well, I fear that the product they want to use is a kind of treated timber that will never age.
Yes, something needs to kind of unify this building, and I'm not quite sure what it is yet, but it's probably the way that they do the cladding.
The choice of mass-produced and imported cladding that won't age with the landscape is a massive problem on this build. But any alternative will have to be mindful of the sub £100,000 budget.
You know, it costs no more money to do this cladding in a different way, but it would look so much better.
At the end of the day, design is down to personal opinion, and Ruth and Tony are used to doing things their own way, but we've got to be honest and tell them what we think. They've only got one crack at this. On site, work is underway, laying the concrete basement. But they've already been forced into a major design change. After drastically underestimating some of their costings, they've had to abandon one of the planned 3 wings, and they'll have to try doubly hard to keep future costs down.
It's all hands on at the moment.
I just sort of scrounged favours off friends, and no doubt they'll scrounge a favour back off me, which I shan't complain about.
The first stage of the build will eat up around 1/3 of their tiny budget, so they need to be wary of early overconfidence.
What would you charge, Mark? £50,000 to do a job like this?
I read about 100,000 or anyone else.
They're also relying on Tony being able to do much of the work.
Hello. Only getting away from me.
They may feel the build is racing ahead, but Ruth and Tony still need to finalise what their finished house will look like,
Tricky little number.
and that could have big implications for their budget. And right now there are aspects of it that could look awful too. Most of all, that expensive and unattractive mass-manufactured cladding. I'm urgently tracking down alternative solutions at this Wiltshire home. This is a house by an architect called Stephen Turville here in a beautiful village in Wiltshire, and it's a really great example of how to build in a rural setting while being contemporary, not just mimicking historic architecture, making something really new that I think fits in really beautifully with this site. I've got unique access to this award-winning family home, built on the site of an old telephone exchange. Despite being a low-cost build like Ruth and Tony's, it looks incredible, inside and out. Most important of all, the no-frills agricultural shape fits fantastically with the surroundings. There are lots of things about it that the building just does really well. First of all, it picks a really simple form. It's a kind of barn-like building with a pitched roof, and you can sort of see there's minimal detail other than that. No overhanging eaves. Makes it kind of very elementary, but also somehow gives it a relationship to, you know, farm buildings and those kind of big pitched roof buildings we're used to seeing in rural settings. I think for Ruth and Tony, the simple form of this proves that in a rural setting, sometimes it's that kind of elemental feeling that you want. Ruth and Tony could learn from the inexpensive use of materials here. When you look at a building like this, you realise that you know, good design doesn't have to cost the earth. This is a very straightforward piece of construction. It's cladding, insulation, structure behind. That's what Ruth and Tony are going to be doing, and they can take lessons from the beauty and simplicity of the detailing here for their own build. Ruth and Tony have lived on the farm for so long, they've lost sight of how that location needs to work with their new home. I think one thing I'd really like Ruth and Tony to look at is something that this building does really well. It takes inspiration from what really the surroundings are all about. These allotments and the inspiration it's taken from these allotment sheds says a lot about what the architect was thinking when they came and looked at the site. They didn't just see the beautiful bits, they saw the bits that are perhaps a bit less noticeable. Ruth and Tony could do with a bit of that. They live on their site is on a beautiful geographic setting, but it also has bits of sheds and bits of farm buildings and polytunnels and all the stuff that you get in the countryside. I just hope they embrace all of it. It's going to be tough getting them to see their environment with fresh eyes and coming up with low-cost ways of adapting their designs. The build is moving fast. Completing the basement has already cost them £30,000. Today, the prefab structure has arrived. Each section of the timber frame has been custom made at a factory, ready to be put up in situ.
I'm glad they know what they're doing.
Prefabricated timber frames are one of the simplest and least expensive methods of self-building. More so if you do most of the work yourself. Getting the frame and full assembly built by professionals would have cost £32,000. Ruth and Tony have brought that cost down to £25,000 by assembling it themselves.
You either pay £7 grand and you stand back and watch somebody do everything, or you have a bit of hassle and you do it yourself. So we do it ourselves. So, because I'm tight.
But Supervisor Kevin knows the job is tougher than they expect.
It looks easy, but it's going to be a little more difficult than they think, yeah.
Instead of using the timber frame company's lifting machinery, they're gambling the farm digger can do the job.
Too heavy. My digger's not counterbalanced enough to there's not enough weight on the back end of the digger to lift the whole lot.
So you wouldn't use a machine like that. It's a little bit different to what we used to.
That's why we're going to split the packs now, which isn't difficult. They are manageable.
This was unique this morning from our perspective.
Despite the teething trouble, Ruth and Tony are still confident that they can manage the rest of the job themselves.
They're going to show us how to put the first few panels up, so they're leading us, they're holding our hands for us, bless us, and then they're going to lead us to it.
This is just like a IKEA flat pack, and as long as the instructions aren't in Swedish, we should be alright. So you get the nails into the middle.
Yeah, so the nails, so you use double nails, so it'll be 300.
Double nails every 300. Right. I haven't asked him whether he thinks I'm stupid or brave. He could be very diplomatic and say, we'll see how it goes.
With the day's lesson over, Tony and Ruth are left to crack on.
If they were doing it, it would take them 5 or 6 days.
But after 3 weeks, they've barely got the exterior walls assembled and still need to complete the entire roof. Despite their self-confidence, this project needs all the help it can get. Now, 6 months into the build, and they are still stuck in a caravan, with no central heating, the most basic of kitchens, and a chaotic lack of storage.
I sure as whatnot don't want to be stuck here for too long. I think it's going to be just one winter. Ruth thinks we're going to be here for about 3 winters, so I'm hoping I can pleasantly surprise her.
Should we start afresh, or should we...
I really hope Ruth and Tony's self-sufficient outlook won't stop them listening to Pierce's first passionate plea to save the exterior.
This is the time to go and talk about cladding, because my worry is that they will go out, they will order some horrible plasticized wood, and before I know it, that will arrive on site and clad this building. That stuff is designed not to age, so it'll sit forever on the hilltop looking like a plastic shed. I need to make sure that isn't going to happen.
But he may have his work cut out.
There's a lot of people from day one who've told us how to build this place and what we should do. Some we've listened to and some we haven't.
Hi Tony.
Right, Pierce?
How are you doing?
Oh, not so bad.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a bit like a noddy house though, isn't it? It's a bit red. It's
enormous.
Well, yeah, I think actually it'll tone down a bit when we get the cladding on.
To help with the decision, samples have been erected on site and left to weather for 3 months. And there's a major difference of opinion over the results.
I quite like this one.
Yeah, I think that looks awful.
Yeah.
I actually think that looks like the garden shed.
You
which
don't
has
like
been
the character of this?
No, I don't.
Yeah.
We want something like this.
Yeah.
Even that.
It looks like they could be set in their ways on this one.
What about, looking around here, I think there's the most amazing, beautiful palette of materials right here. You're not tempted to clad it in wriggly tin like this barn.
Well, we're with Ruth, but I would think she'd pull some faces at that, Piers, but...
I guess I feel this looks a bit suburban in this context. It's a bit insipid for you. My worry about this is that it won't age well.
Talk to the project manager and the boss, and she will only be all ears.
It's really interesting that farmers hate wriggly tin. They hate the kind of character of rusting old things lying around. But actually, that stuff is so beautiful. It's so kind of natural in this landscape. You know, it actually is this landscape.
So it's stalemate over the cladding for now, but there's another of their design decisions to tackle. The layout for the entrance. The front door opens into an enclosed hall, whilst the kitchen has no outside door, just a very tall window. It could be confusing. Can Piers persuade them to do it differently?
So this is your front door?
No.
That isn't a door, that's a long
full-length window.
No.
We've put the door, that is the front door.
That's the front door round the corner.
Yeah.
Excuse me, that's a utility room door. The front door is there.
Sorry, I stand
The
corrected.
proper front door you will come in is there.
It's here.
Yeah,
The
but
boiler suits and wet dog door is there.
we might be able to see it with all the scaffold.
The spatial flow of the building doesn't feel instinctive. Everyone arrives at what is a fixed window, so getting them to actually just think about how people would arrive at their front door, rather than this perverse thing of arriving at a window and being told you have to go around the back of the house to get in, or round into a lobby that someone will use once a year. And will you go in and out this way? Or is that just
Unlikely.
Very unlikely.
So why do you need a posh entrance? What about going straight into your kitchen?
Do you mop your kitchen floor? Because
No.
I do. Muddy boots, wet dogs. No, thank you.
Given they're not budging, Piers is forced towards a more radical suggestion.
What about taking out some of these walls?
That's quite an idea.
This could go. We could make this that wide an entrance, which would be great, because you come in the door, you can see straight into the kitchen and you can see into the living room.
Finally, they're taking some of our input on board, but they've now spent half their budget and still need to finish the exterior and later complete the entire interior. Even on an ordinary build, that could cost another £65,000. I think they need to claw back at least £15,000 from their existing plans. On the drawings, there's a living roof, completely covered with a carpet of sedum plants. It's an interesting feature, but it's not essential. It is something that could be added in the future.
That feels an indulgence, an expensive sedum roof at the moment. Sedum roof typically on a house this size might cost 10 grand. If you did it yourself, it might cost 5 grand. I would park it until you finish and you have that money burning a hole in your pocket and then spend it on that bit of it.
That sounds a brilliant idea, especially if I'm running out of money and I can get a decent cooker in the kitchen.
That is actually what your Rayburn would cost.
Exactly. I like the Rayburn idea.
But there are even bigger problems with the exterior design. We're desperate to help them to think about how the finished house will look, set in the landscape. The plan shows a built-on sunshade made of timber called a brise soleil. These are usually used to stop buildings with very large windows from getting too hot. But do they really need one for the frequently cold and overcast Shropshire climate?
So looking around in this landscape at farm buildings, they all sit very well in this landscape. I think the frippery and the fussiness of the Brise Soleil would be problematic in this landscape.
I think we might well leave the Brise Soleils and live in our house and see if they're necessary.
So, a stay of execution for the fussy Brise Soleil, and perhaps £10,000 now saved towards completing their interior. But there's still that even bigger and critical design question: the cladding.
One of the problems I have with what you have got up on your sample panel, I think it will be quite stark or quite alien in this landscape, quite yellowish. And the idea of using a kind of insipid manufactured product for your cladding fills me with a kind of horror, you know.
It is still timber though, bless it, it's just been treated.
But you don't like the grey, I mean you can see the grey of the barn behind it. You don't like that grey, do you?
I don't mind it on the barn behind it.
Yes. Why don't you like it on your house?
I just don't like that look. I think it looks too unkempt, maybe.
What about Wrigley tin, like the barn at the top, which is red Wrigley tin?
You just said it, it's a barn.
Why is there a difference between a barn and a house?
Because I'm not going to live in a barn, I'm going to live in a house and a home.
We've really got to get Ruth out of this fixed mindset that natural aged cladding is only for barns. So, 5 months into the build, I'm taking her 250 miles out of her comfort zone to the best place in the country to witness the versatility of weathered wood. The Dungeness coast. Scattered around this 10-mile stretch of shingle headland in Kent are some extraordinary modern buildings that somehow sit happily next to the old fishermen's huts and abandoned boats that litter the area.
So Ruth, welcome to Dungeness. It's kind of amazing landscape, isn't it?
It is, isn't it? Even though it's shrouded in mist, it's quite atmospheric, isn't it?
What's really important to me and why I love this place is that it's got a sense of things that really belong here, even though they're very diverse. But somehow they feel part of the landscape.
The unique landscape of Dungeness attracts many artists. And to provide studios, the Crosley building was opened in 2011. It shows that grey timber doesn't have to look like a shed.
So tell me what your reaction is to this lovely silver timber box.
I'm quite surprised. I'm quite liking it.
This is a wonderful example of contemporary architecture that has relevance to Ruth and Tony's budget self-build.
This is a cedar box. Now, cedar was a material you weren't so enthusiastic about, but when you see it weathering consistently, it's nice.
It is nice. I'm very impressed with this material and how it works. I'm still not completely convinced about our place.
Is that because of the colour, or why do you think?
Do you know, I don't know what it is. It might be because of the colour. The silver is great, and silver by the seaside also is fantastic. I still like something that's slightly browner.
Dungeness is a great place to show Ruth how beautiful weathered materials can be. Rusty metal develops an interesting patina, and wood gets more character as it ages.
It's completely charming the way this is decayed, isn't it? But I think maybe it's got some lessons for us.
That is amazing, I must admit. I never thought about showing the nails like they have here, and I don't suppose we could show copper nails, but I do like it.
Yes, this is a beautiful combination,
It is,
isn't
isn't it?
These two natural materials, both taking on a different kind of patina.
When they're weathered, yes.
Our trip to Dungeness has opened Ruth's eyes to how landscape can inspire architecture. I just hope it's a lesson she will take forward into the new build.
I'm not a builder, I'm not an architect. I'm somebody that wants a nice house.
We do have one last card to play in the cladding debate. A visit to a very special house that's been clad in wriggly tin and timber from the larch wood of the surrounding landscape. It's Piers' own award-winning self-built home. Some felled local larch provides the perfect display of rough sawn cladding styles.
Homegrown, slow-grown larch is one of the most durable cladding materials they can get, and this will last 75 years without any maintenance whatsoever.
Slow-grown local larch timber doesn't just look good, it can provide a long-lasting finish that avoids the costs of treated softer wood. It's our final hope.
For me, this type of cladding is just so much more interesting than the kind of, the kind of sanitized, sort of over-processed stuff that I've seen at Ruth and Tony's place. This is rough sawn, it is rough and ready, there's exposed nails, and it's very kind of imprecise, and for me, that's the language that the building needs to stop it becoming a kind of business park shed.
Some language that should be music to Ruth and Tony's ears is at £10 a square metre, this rough sawn larch is less than half the price of the processed timber they had in mind. Piers has treated some of the wood with an inexpensive stain, as Ruth has stated a strong preference for keeping a warm wood tone.
So what I'm doing on these is experimenting with a very quick matte black, dark, very quick water-based stain, and leaving the cover strip as unstained larch. They may hate it, they may think it just looks like a fence, but I think, we've got no choice but to have one last go at convincing them that this is something that could make the house actually look amazing. This is actually very simple, very traditional cladding, which is a chunky, oversized board with a cover strip that's nailed between the boards through to the back and behind.
I'm not sure I like it quite so dark and stripy like that.
Honest, to have it black,
Yeah.
it's a bit too dark.
Sure.
It's not a positive first response.
But actually this comes in every colour from clear down to black.
You could actually stain that in one colour,
Yes.
maybe leave this natural,
Yeah.
so that you have a combination, and you still get your shadows, but you get the look of real wood.
Okay, I want to see some aged timber now, that what it might look like in 10 years' time.
Luckily, Piers' woodshed is the perfect example of weathered larch cladding.
This is 10 years. Actually, this is 8 years. The house is 10 years. This is
fair
8 years.
enough, which is what I wanted to look at, definitely.
Yeah, exactly.
When you look up close, it's still got some colour.
Ruth, where are we?
I am swayed. This has weathered nicely, and it's still quite warm and not too grey.
If we can use something like this, then I'd be more than happy.
But I think we need to shake on it before you change your mind. Good.
That's great. A swayed decision.
It's a cladding coup by Piers, and I'm delighted. This has clawed back £5,850 for the rest of the build. Most of all, it's a big success for the future look of the farmhouse and the surrounding countryside.
The decision has been made. We're definitely going to go with larch. It's nice and chunky, it's quite meaty, and it's a big house, so it'll take it beautifully.
But that celebration proved short-lived. 2 more months pass, and the winter weather brings the build to a standstill. They've spent over £70,000 and are forced to do all the work themselves. Ruth and Tony are still trapped, subsisting in the caravan. Truly testing times for these novice builders and their self-assembled structure.
Last time I came to Shropshire, I was a bit worried that Ruth and Tony's house looked a bit flimsy. As a design, it didn't look like it would withstand much battering, and this is why. If it doesn't work, this weather will find it out right away.
It's a relief to see the now streamlined exterior, minus that very unnecessary sunshade.
And what we see right now is a kind of clear envelope of the building. They've taken away some of the unnecessary details that the original plans had in them, some of the kind of peripheries and the additions and the terraces and so on. And it looks really, really nice. We made it. Well, what a relief to be inside. And it's quiet, and it's not windy, and it's not raining in here. It's weather tight, and the building's more or less ready to go, ready to be clad, ready to be fitted up.
But fitting out the interior is going to be a big challenge. Not only is there a lot of it, and not much in the savings pot, Ruth and Tony are still struggling to decide exactly what they want. Ruth has been researching floors, wall coverings and general decor for months now, and she's utterly at a loss.
I've read loads of magazines, I've flipped through, I've asked people, I've looked at people's houses. And I didn't know about galley kitchens and U-shaped kitchens and kitchen triangles because I came into the place as my parents had it. It was a kitchen, it was there. Now and again, if I think too much about everything, I think, whoa!
And after yet another long, hard day on site, Tony seems overwhelmed and at a real low.
The biggest worry we have now is that we've got this beautifully situated house. We're going to have the outside lovely. What we don't want is people to come in and go, oh, what have they done? Because if they do that, then what's the point? So we need to get this right.
It's a moment to reflect on just how important this whole project is.
This is a once in a lifetime, and that's it. There's no way that I'm going to be building any more houses. For me and Ruth, this is it. This is the swan song for me. I suppose this is the height.
Ruth and Tony are at their lowest ebb. With money dwindling fast and the entire interior to finish, they desperately need low-cost, creative solutions if they are ever going to finish their ambitious house. So I'm forced back out on the hunt for ideas. I've been given access to the Collage House in London, the private home of designer Jonathan Tuckey, who created this interior from an old industrial workshop. In his work, he finds extraordinary ways to transform old buildings for modern uses.
I think for Ruth and Tony, there's so much to learn from a place like this. You know, they've got to that stage where they're looking at their interior and trying to just figure out what the hell they're going to do.
This place is full of beautiful but budget-conscious ideas, like these exposed copper pipes with money-saving standard plumber's fittings. But the first thing to set the tone in this interior are the materials used on the floors and walls. By choosing ones that look good without being decorated, they've saved time and money.
This is an interior made out of plywood, out of polished concrete, some metal, and then just the raw walls of the found space of the old factory. All of that just kind of coming together, you know, in a way that sort of looks a bit unfinished but has its own kind of character.
Ruth has finally conceded the need for natural wood tones on the farmhouse exterior. I wonder if she can be convinced this cheaper option is also right for the interior.
This is beech-faced plywood. When you get these real natural materials, natural facings of materials, you know, they have a quality of their own. You should be choosing them with as much care as you would a paint colour or anything else, because they have their own character, and if you choose them right, then they really start to add a lot to the interior.
Taking the lead from this beautiful space could not only save them money, but also give them a unique property. I've passed on my findings to Ruth and Tony. Today, I find out if they are ready to take them on board for their cash-strapped build in Shropshire. Tell me, Ruth, where you've got to with your thinking about the materials inside. What are you thinking in terms of wall coverings and so on now?
We've settled we do like the idea of birch bark ply, but I don't like the idea of it on the ceiling, so we're going for a product called Thermacell on the ceiling, so no plasterboard.
Well, I'm just so excited that you've gone for these materials, because I think that language of birch ply, could be absolutely beautiful. But just as Ruth and Tony embraced their lower cost option, disaster strikes. It turns out they've lost track of their finances yet again. And having now crunched their numbers, they're in real trouble.
I've done almost all the costs to date, and it's going to be jolly tight. We're going to go over budget. We have spent so far about 75,000, 75 to 80,000.
Ruth and Tony have to face the stark reality that the build won't come in under their 99k budget. Despite months of hard work, they'll have no alternative but to start dipping into their retirement fund. Every penny now has to count, but unforeseen expenses keep coming, including an eye-watering lighting quote.
The sum total was large, and I was sitting down at the time. It is £11,500. That's not for anything else but the lights. That's not fitting them, it's not the cables, just the lights.
It's a crisis call for Piers. He has a brief to create a beautiful lighting solution for a lot less money. But it's also the first time he'll see his earlier rough-sawn larch success in situ.
There it is. Wow, look at that. So seeing it up there, I'm really pleased. I think it looks great. This could have been the worst type of suburban plastic fake building sitting up there on the horizon, desecrating this beautiful landscape. Actually, it looks like it belongs. But the biggest thing that strikes me, the best thing, is that it doesn't look like a cut-price building. It looks like a fantastic, solid, authentic piece of design. And I feel really pleased about that. Hi there.
Okay.
Yes,
Looking great.
Yeah.
good, you like it? What do you think about your cladding?
Cladding looks fantastic. Really good.
But seeing the cladding is a boon on an otherwise difficult trip.
I've heard that you've had a really expensive lighting quote.
We did have quite an expensive lighting quote, yes, you're right.
Well, to say I was incandescent with rage would be an understatement.
Ruth and Tony's quote includes several designer pendant light fittings and scores of LED lamps in special ceiling units. But before Piers puts forward low-cost alternatives, a reminder they really should have listened to his suggestion to move that front door.
Hang on a second, Tony. I still think we should be going in here.
I know you do, Piers. I know you do.
Piers has already clawed back money with design tweaks.
Come on, a little bit.
The range cooker has been bought with the savings made from ditching the living cedar roof.
Straight into the kitchen, and look.
Very nice.
It better be the kitchen, otherwise that's in the wrong place.
But now the lights. LED lamps are energy efficient, but cost almost £70 each. When money is as tight as on this build, the first rule is to prioritise.
I think your kitchen is about the most important space in terms of lighting. I completely get spending money on LED lighting over a kitchen work surface where you have task lighting where you really need it.
Yes.
But almost nowhere else in the whole house. In your living room, it may be that you do have some beautiful looking lamps that you put on and some discrete lights elsewhere, but I don't think those need to be LEDs here. And I do think if you have a lot of ceiling lights in here, it will feel like a glitzy office. It's not a glitzy office, it's your home. If you do have a recessed light.
Piers has a solution that's not only cheap, but will maximise the choice of finish on the kitchen and living room walls.
What's great is that you don't even need a fitting at all, because what you can do is use an offcut of beech ply to make a panel that just sits off the wall with a bulb behind it that washes light out around it. Or you can shine it up or you can shine it down. You can make your own fit for nothing. You can make your own fitting. And your bayonet fitting is 99p and your bulb is £3. So that's £4 instead of 70 odd pounds for a single LED fitting.
We like the sound of that, don't we? This is music, this is.
The discrete wall lights aren't the whole story. The dining area and the entranceway are crying out for something special. Piers thinks there is an achievable option right under their noses, if he can overcome their long-held resistance on this build to embracing the nature of the farm around them. I've come to the perfect place to track down upcycling answers for Ruth and Tony's financially challenged build. This is a bar with the most extraordinary interior, an interior made of reclaimed materials used in really unconventional ways, but most importantly, cheap materials. This is an excellent place to see how designers have ingeniously used materials. This bar may not be to everyone's taste, but it's an imaginative use of the inexpensive. In recent years, designers have really become interested in this idea of recycling, reusing materials, and taking kind of modest materials and glorifying them, making them into something really precious. And we're going to only see more of it as materials get more expensive, as resources get scarcer, and the ready-made becomes something really valuable. These are just simple copper pipes painted green, and what they've created is a kind of ivy-like wall, and it's fun and it's rather beautiful, and it's kind of adds to that atmosphere here of a sense of things just found lying around on a building site used to make an interior. By using mismatched, imperfect or oddment materials in an unusual way, Ruth and Tony could save money and make a unique design statement. The designer has realised that the backs of tiles can be just as beautiful, if not more beautiful, than their fronts. So they flipped it round, lacquered it, and made this really, really nice effect. Well, as soon as you get to the bar, really, there's all sorts of stuff. I mean, of course, these lights, these amazing, tough, plastic sort of builder's buckets. You know, you can get these in a pound shop sometimes, but they found lots of vivid colours of these, used them as lampshades. If you're modifying found objects, you need to make sure you do it safely. But if you can, these bucket lights could cost you under a £5 instead of a designer price tag of maybe £100. I think what this brings is a certain kind of character that an ordinary lampshade doesn't bring. There's no lampshade you could buy that would give you that atmosphere. And I think this is something that Ruth and Tony need to think about. How can they take their own sensibilities and start to look at things that just objects they enjoy and think of the use of them? They can come up with a seriously odd but very compelling interior. This is a bar, but there's no reason at all why this couldn't influence an interior in Shropshire. You know, this kind of attitude of the ready-made, of the cheap made beautiful, is something that Ruth and Tony, I'm sure, would love. But getting them to stop seeing junk and start seeing potential light fittings is Piers' toughest call yet.
So this is where I spotted these gas bottles, and I think there's one, two, the smaller one.
All over the place.
But it's not just gas bottles that we've talked about, it's also things like, you know, odd bits of steel.
Oh yeah, bits of steel.
You know, you could have this blasted, paint it yellow, stick a whole lot of standard fittings on the top of it.
And suspend that from the ceiling.
Suspend that from the ceiling, which would look great. You know, I mean, farms are full of things that are made out of nice materials.
This will require a total turnaround towards their surroundings.
I see here a very, very expensive designer light fitting.
Fantastic.
It's a drinker. It's an old cattle drinker.
But the approach seems to be getting the thumbs up.
So there's beautiful bits of timber next door, there's old lights, bits of steel, cattle feeders, and all of that stuff that really reflects your personality could be in that building.
What a result. Ruth and Tony still have a long way to go to make the house habitable, but at least the final phase is now within reach.
Since Pierce came and intervened, we are moving on a lot quicker now, and decisions are much easier to make, and so now we can progress to the next stage, get the first fix, get the boarding up, then we can sort out light fittings and how we fit them, no problem.
Tony is turning his considerable handyman skills to working on some pretty tricky items.
Shot blast it all off back to the metal, repaint it the colour of your choice, and there you go, Bob's your uncle. One Art Nouveau light fitting.
But it's not just lighting they need to save on, it's all their fittings and finish. So Ruth, once adamantly anti-anything barnyard, is also digging stuff up from all over the farm.
These are from the old wood chip burner that we had. Thought maybe we'd chrome them, but we actually think it looks great just how it is.
People have a huge hang-up about their houses. They know that they're judged by their house. Ruth and Tony are debunking that. They're really going out on a limb and thinking for themselves.
Land Rover side lights for seeing your way up the stairs. What could be a better way to end the day?
Instead of just looking at a magazine and picking a product, they're making their own product. They're going beyond the whole notion of product.
Piers came and he just helped us get our imaginations going. And then we started walking around going, oh, well, actually.
So instead of being an alien spaceship that's landed here, this house is gradually becoming Ruth and Tony's.
Now I'm on a constant, eyes are going all the time. What can I use that for? There must be use.
The plan is to cut that out and use that as a backsplash.
This is a really radical thing for them to build their own house that's not just modern, but it's inventive in how it goes about being modern.
We're going to have lights either side and we'll probably keep the clock.
I defy anybody to say that that is not going to make an attractive light.
We hope we've put Ruth and Tony on the right track, but there's still a long way to go. 18 months ago, Ruth and Tony made a bold decision to pull down their old farmhouse and replace it with a determinedly modern design. It's now 6 months since we last saw them, and 18 months since they started. Piers and I are back to see how they got on. And is their finished build everything we initially feared?
Well, here it is.
Looking nice at the moment though, isn't it?
Yeah, I like the
fantastic.
depth that the cladding has.
The chunkiness, you did well on that.
And the way
That's
that it
super.
casts shadow on
Yes,
itself.
it does. And on a really bright sunny day, it does cast beautiful shadows.
I think it's great. I mean, I hope you're pleased.
We are pleased, and we're pleased you're pleased actually.
What's really impressive about it is it doesn't feel like you've cut corners. You've combined, industrial manufactured materials with natural ones to make something that I think tells people what is possible to do. Why don't we take a look at how we get into this building? Because this is something that you've been concerned
Yeah, well, I think
about.
this is where we should go in.
Here we are.
And I still want to come and find, oh, there's no door handle, but
Okay, Piers, I'll invite you back again when it's blowing a gale. Let me lead the way.
You can't win them all. Inside, Piers suggested Ruth and Tony removed an internal wall to create an open-plan living space. Has it worked?
Well, this is just great. Just turned out really, really well, hasn't it? These floor-to-ceiling windows.
In the same vein as taking things off the outside, I also love the fact that you've taken the wall out between here and the kitchen.
It does through flow, that's very important.
Yeah. Because we lived in the conventional farmhouse, which was all little boxes, it was completely isolated from everybody else. Whereas now,
It's homely.
homely.
And I know I see you've gone for the timber wall coverings,
Yes.
which has a nice simplicity to it.
It does save quite a lot of effort in terms of plastering and skinning and painting. It's relatively low cost.
And I think what's working really, really well is the way that these two spaces just fit together, and the kitchen feels really connected to the lounge room without it just all being one space.
It's hard to imagine that Tony and Ruth have done most of the work themselves. But having lived here for 20 years, they knew how to capture the spectacular views from every room.
We wanted as much light, natural light, as we could get, without being sort of like goldfish in a bowl. We've got the best of everything. We've got the views, we've got the light. It just still makes us feel part of our surroundings, which is really great.
You've got a definite zone in here. I mean, what's it like having a place to cook again?
I love my kitchen. Thank you very much indeed. I'm pleased with it.
There's a real generosity of space here, which I really like. I love rooms that have windows both sides.
And has it been a low-cost kitchen? How much did this cost you?
This cost me about £5,000 in the sales. I think it was 5,000 and a little bit. I couldn't knock that little bit off.
That
Including
not including
No,
the
I'm afraid so. That was our extravagance.
One thing that threatened to send the build hugely over budget was that lighting quote.
So it's still obviously unfinished up here, but wow, look at these lights.
Their low-cost solutions are fantastic examples of homespun creativity. And Tony's prized recycled cylinder lights are a great statement.
There's something obscene about going out and spending a large amount of money on a manufactured fitting when you can have this.
Exactly. You couldn't create a better shape, and it's something that was just gone into the scrapyard for recycling.
Well, your bathroom, it's almost finished.
It is almost finished.
The simple design is carried into the bathroom, and Ruth has come up with her own clever money-saving ideas.
It must be so great to have a functioning room in the house.
A bathroom. It is so luxurious. We like the shower.
How did that first shower? That must have been such relief.
It was so nice. You've no idea. The multi-panels on the wall there, no grouting, lovely and easy to clean. I like that. Don't like housework. And this is flooring. So that was quite an on-the-spot decision. I brought a sample back. Tony went, yep, like that. Next day I was out, did it. So we need to finish it off over the top like that, but that's fine.
Knocking down their old house was a radical solution to getting the home they wanted and opening the next chapter of their lives. Ruth and Tony lived in a tiny caravan for nearly 18 months and physically pushed themselves to the limit. But has it been worth it?
We've put our hearts and souls into that. We did it, we're happy.
You seem to complement each other very well in this kind of team. I mean, that must have been something that has pulled you through this process.
I would not build a house with anybody but Ruth. She has been brilliant, and we've done it as a team.
Having failed to stick to their 99k budget, how much damage has since been done to their precious retirement fund?
So, of course, the critical question I really want to ask you, though, is tell me how much you've spent on this build to date.
Okay, 120,000. We've treated ourselves to a few things like the cooker.
That takes you considerably over the £100,000 mark, but it's still a pretty big house. I mean, this is a huge property. I just think that's astonishing.
While that £20,000 overspend is a big bite to take from their pension pot, the estimated value of the finished house is now £450,000. Ruth and Tony have no plans to sell, but at least they'll have some extra security in their retirement. Now it's time to celebrate what is still a remarkable achievement.
This is a big house with hundreds of square metres. Yeah, the way that they've done that is through their own sheer sweat and grit and determination.
This is a hugely significant building. Culturally, Ruth and Tony live in a very conservative rural community, and this is radically modern for this place.
I think we've got very good value for money in what we've spent, and I don't think we could have got better value.
It would be lovely if people are inspired, or gives them the confidence if they're already thinking of that they can go and do it.
I'm pleased that Kieran and Piers were enthusiastic and liked what we did.
We work as a team, and I'm not a builder and I've had no experience of house building, and we supported each other, haven't we?
Yep, we're just still the same people. We just happened to build a house.
Next time, ambitious young couple Tom and Zoe want to build the house of their dreams.
I want this house to have such a wow factor.
But with limited time and money,
I was doing this at 11 o'clock last night and now I'm doing it again tonight.
That's an extra £1,000 that we've just saved.
will their relationship survive the pressure?
What about making the whole look like it's like a waterfall or something? Do you reckon?
No. How tacky is that?
If you thought your to-do lists were long, wait till you see scientist Robert Boyle's Science Britannica is on the way next. Over on BBC4 now, Dan Jones takes a look at the ancient English art of embroidery with fabric of Britain.